Nano machine. Bai, Anhongweolja. Chapter 275. Within the Sword Creek. Part 1. Chun Yoan's body was engulfed with the flame that shot out from behind. The heat coming from the explosion was overwhelming and felt as if all the skin on Yoan's back was melting. With fire all over his body, Yoan couldn't withstand the pain and screamed. Aorg. He tried to endure the pain and jump, but he couldn't fight against the power of the explosion. Yoan was thrown out of the cave, and he couldn't do anything but drop down with his body on fire. He then caught a glimpse of Munku's face gripped with despair as she saw Yoan falling off the cliff. Although the fire burning his entire body, Yoan's head was filled with Munku's crying face that made his heart tight. With his body falling, the wind put out the fire that was on his body, activating self-healing mode to heal burns from the explosion. Even when he was dropping, Nano began healing the burns that were all over his body. His skin melted down into the muscles, but it quickly began to heal. The pain subsided quickly, but Yoan was still dropping at an enormous speed. Is it that deep? Falling speed increasing. Danger! Danger! Nano's voice rang out, warning him of the situation. Yoan had augmented reality on his eyes, so he saw Nano shooting red lights that showed numbers which seemed to be the speed of Yoan's fall. Yoan had once jumped off from a high mountain, but that wasn't long fall like this. As Yoan kept falling through the dark depth, Yoan was struck with the fear of death. Am I going to die here? Surely anyone would be facing death in such a situation. Pain, darkness, and nothingness. With all that coming into one's emotions, it was bound to put one into the depth of despair. User's heart rate increasing rapidly. Nano's voice warned of the danger, but Yoan couldn't focus. This speed of this drop would shatter Yoan's body into pieces the moment he dropped, which would render Nano's healing ability to be useless. Do I have to accept my death? Yoan was about to accept it as his fate. That's when a sudden gush of wind swirled around, pushing Yoan to the side. Ugh! Yoan was shocked by sudden wind changing his course. His body then struck against the wall of the huge rock. But that wasn't the end. With the strong gush of wind, Yoan's body was then thrown off to another side. Arg! Yoan then came back to his senses from the pain. He almost succumbed to the fear of death, but he was able to get out of it. I can't die like this. There was something more fearful than death itself. Yoan couldn't finish what he had set out to do yet. And to think that he couldn't see the woman's face whom he had given to the first time in his life, his head instantly cleared up. As Yoan was flung about all over the place from the wind, he noticed something. He didn't see it when he was in fear, but now he saw it clearly. It's a sword. It wasn't like above under the word sword, but there were a lot of swords stuck in the wall. Yoan then came up with an idea and reached to back of his waist. It's there. The white dragon blade still hung by his waist. He wasn't sure what the scabbard strap was made of, but it withstood the fire and was still hanging on Yoan's waist. Yoan then pulled out the white dragon blade. He then gripped the blade and took a deep breath. If I'm going to die, I'll at least die trying to survive. The strong gush of wind still threw him all over the place as he dropped. When he then was thrown to the other side of the wall, he made a move. Ha! Yoan used all his might to strike down with white dragon blade against the wall. Whether it was the sharpness of the blade or the speed of the fall, but the blade began slicing through the wall as it stuck there. Arg! The impact broke Yoan's right shoulder bone and ribs. Even if Yoan's muscles were enhanced beyond the limit of a normal human, it didn't apply to his bones. Yoan was trying to fight the gravity pulling him down, so his bone paid the price. Stop! Please! And after falling straight through for about 15 meters, his dropping speed began to slow down and the blade soon came to a stop. It worked. It was very close. Yoan almost died by dropping, but he had survived. He then glimpsed down and saw that the ground wasn't very deep down from here. Ugh! Detected disjointed shoulder and a bone fracture. Third right rib bone is broken. Initiating self-healing mode. Nano began to activate to heal broken bones, and the pain began to subside. Yoan looked down and saw that he could easily jump down from the height he was currently at if he used the stepping skill. When the pain went away, Yoan pulled out the blade and dropped safely. As he got on the ground, he slumped down and sighed in relief. Everything was dark, but he was still alive. Yoan then realized martial arts wasn't everything. He was very powerful now, but he learned that there were situations that could still kill him. After resting for a bit, Yoan got up. He now survived, so he had to find a way to go up the cliff. Nano, activate night vision mode. Activating night vision mode. Nano's voice rang and Yoan's eyes turned to see the area clearly. Chapter 276. Within the Sword Creek. Part 2. Yoan's eye grew large. He thought there wasn't anything here, but there were many swords stuck in the ground. They had all rusted through time, so there weren't any useful swords. There are so many swords here. But it wasn't only swords that were here. There were countless skulls and bones scattered around. It seemed these were people who dropped through the cliff and died. Some were too old, barely recognizable if they were human, but there were some that were intact and still had clothes. I almost joined them. But why did they fall and die here? Yoan became curious, but there was no way to find out. Yoan hesitated for a bit, but he then took off one of the pieces of clothing from a skeleton. It's clothing from a dead person, but his original clothes were burned heavily, and they were in no state to be worn. Yoan changed his clothing into the one he picked up and walked over to the cliff wall so he could find a way to climb back up. Yoan thought it was better to find a way up on the opposite side of the giant rock, which was almost upright and slick on the surface. It's not much different here. The other side of the cliff was more rough, but it was actually angled backwards. There was no way of climbing up. Was this why there wasn't any information about this? Even if someone tried to climb down by using rope, that gush of wind would throw the person off balance. Is there any other way? Yoan then began to look around just in case he might find something. As he began to walk around the giant rock, he came to a stop at some point. Huh? Yoan became shocked. He thought maybe what he was seeing was a mistake. He was looking at many traces of a sword and a blade on the giant rock. Why is there a trace of fighting here? It was hard to understand. Yoan was thrown off from the explosion, so he dropped against his intention. But why did all these people come all the way down here and fight? After checking these traces, Yoan's eyes widened. The sword and blade traces were very familiar. Sword force of the Sky Demon? The clear sword trace was very similar to that of the sword force of the Sky Demon. There were few sword movements that didn't match, but the remaining movements were exactly the same. It seemed that this came later than the sword force of the Sky Demon. Wait, maybe. Yoan looked up with shock. He thought he had seen the writing style of sword word up on the cliff somewhere, but he now realized it was Father Chun Ma's writing style. Yoan then brought the black sword to take shape. He then looked at writings on the sword. Sky Demon sword. The sword word engraved on there was almost same as the sword engraved on the wall above. This meant that Father Chun Ma had come here and fought someone. That didn't seem all that impossible, as the recording of Lord's Palace showed that Father Chun Ma even set out to invade all sides, even through Hobuk Castle, where this Sword Creek was at. But what made Yoan shocked was different. What is up with this blade tracing? This blade trace was surely the blade skill of the blade god. Yoan looked at the blade trace left on it and became shocked. I've never seen this. On blade traces that seemed to be the blade skill of the blade god, there were two formations that Yoan was not familiar with. The two formations were more powerful than the 6-blade formation that Yoan learned. It seemed these two were the latter part of the blade skill. I thought the 6 formation was everything. I was wrong. Yoan was beyond shocked to see the blade skill. This was almost as powerful as the sword force of the Sky Demon, except the last formation of the sword force. I didn't think this would be waiting for me here. Yoan thought he was unlucky for falling down, but it was actually a blessing in disguise. It was unclear as to why it was here, but Yoan luckily managed to come across a trace of 2 very powerful warriors fighting against each other, especially because Yoan had Nano who could simulate this. Nano, scan it. Yoan ordered Nano to scan the sword and blade traces. Yes, master. Nano scanned the trace and began analyzing. Yoan was then walking through the traces and, he found something while he walked. This was different from the sword trace he saw. It was left there by combining something and had a word engraved below. Impossible. It seemed whatever the writer was trying to do wasn't achieved. The writing style matched that of Father Chun Ma's. After looking closely, Yoan then realized that the sword trace here wasn't like a fighting trace that was left on the other places. It seemed this trace was left by trying something on it. Why is there the word impossible here? Yoan became confused and ordered Nano to extract these sword traces. When it was finished, Yoan ordered Nano. Nano, show me the 3D image of these sword traces. Yes, master. Initiating 3D view of the scanned sword trace. Complicated sword traces then began to show up with white lines flashing through, and Yoan was able to see sword movements. Yoan was shocked to see these movements in formation form. This is impossible. This was a sword skill that moved beyond conventional body movements, just like how the blade skill of Blade God did. Yoan was able to sense it instinctively. He tried to combine it. That was it. These sword traces that were marked impossible were the creation of Father Chun Ma, which came after fighting against the blade skill of the blade god. Chapter 277. Within the Sword Creek. Part 3. Dark Night. There was a place where the entire area was surrounded by giant rocks. There was opening on the top, so it was only visible from high up. And within the place, there was a large mansion. Inside the mansion's building, there were a whole bunch of pots brewing medicines and the storage of various medicinal herbs. It looked like a hospital of some kind from the first glimpse. This place was the hideout of the godly doctor located within the large rock of the Sword Creek. Inside, there were many beds with one man getting treated above it. The man was the fourth elder of demonic cult, Yang Danhua. He moaned in pain. Ugh. Alright, man up, will you? There was an old woman holding on to Yang Danhua's head so he wouldn't move. She looked well over her 60s, but she had a very well-built body. Her thick arms reminded one of a heavily built body like Ko Wanger. There was the reason why Yang Danhua was such pain. It was because of the location of the wound. With the sword chi cutting down on him from the right forehead down to the bottom of his eyes, he had lost his sight. It was a wound he got while fighting the old man from the inn. He had lost an eye, but it was fortunate that he survived. I would not have survived if it wasn't for Master Mun. She was worthy to be one of the 6 swords. She looked innocent and harmless usually, but Yang Danhua saw her raging through her attacks. Most warriors would lose control and go on a rampage in such anger, but Mun Ku helped Yang Danhua effectively to attack the old man. It was why they were able to hold out until he appeared. It's an amazing talent. Maybe we will have another woman warrior as powerful as Elder Een in a few years. It was thanks to Mun Ku that they were alive. Yang Danhua valued this very highly. Ugh. Even if he tried to endure, the sewing on his face was hurt. And when it was almost over, he heard wailing coming from the opposite bed. Wah! Prince, how can this be? There was a girl wailing with both hands on her face. It was Mun Ku. There was another woman, tall and large, hugging her. It was Ho Sanghua who was said to be missing. She was actually at the hideout of the godly doctor. Of course, there were others who were alive from the team. NNNGH, Master. And there was Hu Bong, with linen wrapped all around his body, lying down on the bed with an exhausted expression. He was moaning and crying with Baki sitting next to him with a dumbfounded face. He was just mumbling the same words. I can't believe this. He just kept on saying the same thing. Baki and Ho Sanghua began doing this after they heard that Chun Yoan was caught in the explosion and fell off the cliff. Well, you folks are quite different from one another. The old woman glanced back at Wailing and spoke. She was talking about Ho Sanghua and Baki, who didn't talk much, compared to Mun Ku and Hu Bong, who openly expressed their emotions. But that master of yours must have been a good master. Seeing that all of you are crying. Yang Danhua couldn't say anything to that. He too felt miserable to think about the dead Chun Yoan. He had to give his life for the sin of not being able to protect the Lord, but he had a job to do. The old woman finished sewing up the wound and dabbed mashed herbs over the wound. Yang Danhua then asked the woman carefully. Godly doctor. The old woman was the godly doctor they had been searching for. She was the master of this hidden mansion, and godly Dr. Gamrosu. She raised her eyebrows and spoke. What did I tell you to call me by? Granny Gam. The old woman didn't like to be called godly doctor surprisingly. Yang Danhua first thought maybe she had learned martial arts from her physics, but she didn't know any martial arts. When Danhua became curious, Gamrosu simply replied. Well, you're a doctor so you need to be in shape for long surgeries. Don't you think? That was reasonable of course, although Gamrosu seemed to be overly trained for that. Yang Danhua then asked again. Like I asked earlier, can I make a request to? Ugh. Gamrosu then pushed on the wound where she was dabbing the medicine. Her strength was powerful. Yang Danhua had to stop speaking because of the pain. Strangely, Gamrosu kept on cutting them off from asking on the request ever since they met. She then glanced at the entrance of the room, toward the 2 warriors watching her. It seemed they were keeping their eyes on the doctor. Is she concerned about them? Yang Danhua also realized her attitude wasn't normal, so he stopped his request. He didn't realize at first because he was only thankful for being saved, but he now knew that something strange was going on within this mansion. After patching up the wound and putting linen wrap over it, the godly Dr. Gamrosu got up from her seat. She spoke to Yang Danhua. Well, you will need at least 7 days of treatment. Get some rest now. Chapter 278. Within the Sword Creek. Part 4. She then left the building with the 2 warriors standing guard following her. When she left, Yang Danwa heard a telepathic message coming to him. Did you see that? Yang Danwa turned to the direction, and there was a beautiful woman with thick eyebrows looking at him with her arms crossed, sitting on a bed on the opposite side. It was second elder In Moha. She too was safe. However, Yang Danwa saw In Moha's true face for the first time after he got here, so he looked awkward searching for In Moha's younger look. I think she's being watched. And so are we. Two warriors who stood guard had left together with the doctor, but there were still eyes watching them from the dark. Yang Danwa felt the presence of people watching inside the room. That's why they were talking over telepathic messages. Elder In, what is going on here? They couldn't talk about it because Yang Danwa had to be treated by the doctor ever since he got here. In Moha sighed and answered. We fought them when we got here. When In Moha and others first got to Sword Creek, someone attacked them. It was the warriors who came out from the hidden mansion, and they first attacked and asked who In Moha and the others were. They were within the territory of the forces of justice, so In Moha did not reveal who they were. But she just showed the orange tag and said they had come to meet the godly doctor. Warriors then became less wary and showed interest. That's when we were attacked by that old man from the inn and the other three powerful warriors. A new fight had begun. All four of these newly appeared warriors were so powerful that they killed the spy agent of In Moha's group instantly and also killed two other warriors who came out from Hidden Mansion. And while In Moha was fighting against the old man, he appeared. Hing Wenja of Mutant Strong Sword. Her telepathic message sounded grim with the name, and Yang Danwa narrowed his eyes. So, it was him. Yang Danwa knew the name. Under the 5 most powerful warriors of the entire Yulin, there were those who were known as the Strong 9, who were said to be next 5 most powerful warriors. Hing Wenja was one of the strong, and an elder of the Mutant clan. He helped us to chase away the old man and we were able to enter here. But, we could not persuade the doctor yet. Just like Yang Danwa, In Moha and others requested the doctor to visit. She just kept on saying that it was hard to do that, even with the orange tag. In Moha speculated the reason Gamrosu could not leave this place was related to Hing Wenja, who was protecting this place. What would be the reason? The godly doctor was definitely hiding something. The problem at hand was with the mutant strong sword. It's fortunate that he doesn't know who we actually are. Yang Danwa didn't expect to find such a powerful and prominent figure in forces of justice here. What's interesting was that the other warriors beside Hing Wenja didn't seem like monks from the mutant clan. In Moha then sighed. Yes, but that will not last long. There was no way that a warrior like Hing Wenja would not become suspicious of them. 2 of these visitors were superior master-level warriors which were scarce in number, so it was likely that Hing Wenja will try to find out who they were. Maybe he knows and just wants to use us for a favor. In Moha then continued as she turned to the directions where she felt eyes watching them. In the other building, there was an old man with white beard talking to someone. These people were monks from the inn last night. Mujinya spoke. So, that's why we lost contact with you. Elder Hing. Yes. They were surrounding the creek. I had no choice. The old man with a white beard was the mutant strong sword, Hing Wenja. He explained why he had lost contact with the mutant clan for a month. The reason was because of the old man from the inn. The old man and his cronies had been searching the area to find the hidden mansion, so Hing Wenja couldn't contact the clan. Elder, why don't we move the location to the mutant or Jeagle family's place? If it is almost complete, I don't think the godly doctor needs to stay here anymore. It is better if we leave her alone. I know it is for the greater good, but our actions should be just. Yes, sir. You are right. But as you say, the godly doctor is almost complete with her work. With enemies located near our spot, it is better for us to move. They couldn't bear to move as they were now revealed. The entrance was equipped with a blue pearl stone gate with many traps, but it wasn't going to hold off enemies for long. Mujinja then asked, but Elder, why did you help them? I'm sure that they are from either the forces of evil or from the demonic cult. He was talking about Chun Yoan's group. Mujinja was shocked when he heard from Hing Wenja that the group had at least 2 superior master-level warriors. That level of power was not to come by often. Brother Mu is right, Elder. Monks from the mutant clan were suspicious of Yoan's group after they found out that Yoan had a mask on his face. There was a chance that there were powerful warriors in hiding and were not known, but if 2 superior warriors were in one group, it was likely that they were from one of the 3 main forces of Yulin. They knew all powerful warriors from the forces of justice, so the educated guess would come down to the other 2 forces. And they want godly doctor too. Chapter 279. Within the Sword Creek. Part 5. They will help us, Hingwen just said. Huh? Wait, are you going to ask them to? No. We will use them as our shield and let them fight our enemy, while we return to Mutant Mountain with the godly doctor. Yes, Elder. That sounds like a plan. Mu Jinja nodded in astonishment. He was concerned about Yoan's group as much as the enemy outside, so this plan sounded very good. It didn't matter if Yoan's group was from the current ally, the demonic cult. At the same time, below the cliff, a sound of wind gushing from the movement filled the area. Within the darkness, a young man was moving quickly through with his sword. It was Chun Yoan. He had been practicing sword formations for 2 hours already, but he was doing something entirely different from what he knew before. The formation that continued smoothly suddenly came to a stop, and Yoan's body shook. This resulted because the movements couldn't be connected flawlessly. Ha. Yoan slumped down with exhaustion to rest. His forehead was drenched with sweat. This isn't easy. It was hard to combine 2 legendary martial arts skills into one. What he was trying until now was an attempt to combine the sword force of the Sky Demon with the blade skill of the Blade God. Yoan remembered what happened 4 hours ago. He first was so shocked when he saw the trace left by Father Chunma. How can he come up with such an idea? He was astounded by the idea that he didn't even come to cross. He was only focused on training the completed martial art, but Father Chunma was trying new things with the martial art he had encountered for the first time, although it resulted in a failure. Physical limitation. Chunma was the best in martial arts and the sword, but there was something he couldn't overcome. Even if he had body best fit for martial arts, there was a limit to how far the muscle and its fibers could be strengthened. But the blade skill of the Blade God was only possible when the physical ability was up to its limit. Chunma tried to combine its traits into his sword skill, and after a few tries, he came to a conclusion. Impossible. But Yoan was different. After analyzing the sword force of the Sky Demon, the blade skill of the Blade God, and blood reversion art, his muscles and physical traits were increased beyond the limit of a mere person. Yoan was able to use the formation that Chunma made for a test run very easily. But this wasn't the completed version, as Chunma stopped developing it, so Yoan had to take it as a guideline to do it on his own. It's hard. It was possible in theory, but combining and using it was a different story. The sword force of the Sky Demon was already perfect in its original form, so Yoan had to create an entirely new formation. Let's try again. After a bit of a rest, Yoan got up again and began moving his body to use the sword formation. He was also using Nano to analyze the simulation. But he wanted to cross the limit by himself and learn the understanding through it. Yoan didn't rest while he tried many sword movements in an effort to combine the two. Ha. I'm exhausted, Kropka. After 2 hours, Yoan was now fully exhausted. Almost 4 hours of non-stop usage of the sword force of the Sky Demon depleted his internal energy completely. How could he create a new sword skill that broke the limit that was set in place? He tried many ways but failed constantly. I cannot combine the sword movements if it goes over the current limit. I have to make it work in balance. He had to create new sword movements that could work in balance through all of its movement. After thinking for a while as he lied down, Yoan then came up with a sudden idea in his head. Yeah. Let's not use all of the movements I have right now. If it doesn't fit in well, then I might as well as just take it out. If I stop limiting myself and be free to create the balance, it will be free. The sword movements he had, and thinking about the new movements that could work together with it. Yoan then came to an unexpected situation. The understanding often came when he didn't even think about it. To create a balance, I need freedom. It is created by not locking myself in, but by opening it. Superior Master level was achieved by bringing what one already had into perfect completion in one circle. The reason why a warrior at the Superior Master level can control its internal energy was because of this understanding of having understood how to bring everything into one. But the higher level required another understanding. It required not limiting oneself to controlling the energy, but to be freed from it. When one finds balance to let the energy flow freely in and out of the body, this understanding would be the one to bring warriors to the Supreme Master level. Yoan's body began to shine brightly with the bright lights, and the area around him began to storm. The energy from the environment was sucked into Yoan's empty body where his energy had been depleted. The energy of the environment began running through Yoan's body, and a change began to come onto Yoan, who was already sitting down meditating. Chapter 280. Within the Sword Creek. Part 6. The godly doctor was known to the people of Yulin as a dignified-looking old man who looked like an aristocrat. But her true self was entirely different from her rumors. An old man with a small body, but with heavy and thick muscle. That was the godly doctor, Gamrosu. Why did you want to see me? I'm Busu. Gamrosu spoke to Hingwenja, who called her to his room at the mansion. She seemed uncomfortable that she was called, and Hingwenja smiled softly. To God Almighty. This humble monk had a message to tell you. Granny Gam. The man only spoke like this when he had some uncomfortable request. Gamrosu became concerned and asked back, a message? What is it? I think we have to pack up and leave this place by early morning. Leave? From this Sword Creek? Yes. That is correct. Gamrosu turned furious at request to pack up to leave. This place was home to her and her ancestors. She had been living here for all her life, so it didn't sound all that well to hear that she had to leave. This is different from what you promised. I was promised to stay in exchange for fulfilling your request. And you promised that if I complete the project that you will leave from your home, yes. But the situation has changed. Changed to what? Are you talking about those ones outside? There were always those lurking around. It's not anything new. There were many who came to Sword Creek in search of the godly doctor. But the only times when godly doctor and her ancestors left the mansion was through the orange tag bearers who acquired the tag from longtime acquaintances. I am sure you are aware that this is different from the past. Hingwenja's voice began to drop low. It seemed he had given up on persuading. They are different. They are more dangerous than any of the other enemies you have seen. If you get kidnapped before you finish your project, our operation will fail. Hingwenja walked up in front of the doctor and spoke. You promised that you will help us for the peace of Yulin after you lost the one you hold dear. Please let us protect you from evil. Ugh. Hingwenja insisted heavily and Gamrosu's eyes shook with anger. She was sad that her current state and regretted how it came down to this. She started on work with good cause, but the direction didn't seem to be going as she first thought. Gamrosu's silence was taken as agreement and Hingwenja smiled again. You should finish packing up by 3 a.m. He then let the doctor return to her office so she could pack up. When Gamrosu returned, a man with dark clothing came in. Report. It is as you said, Elder. There are suspicious movements detected around the forest outside the creek. Numbers are increasing, so they'll be coming in by the morning. It was what the scout had found outside the creek. We must make haste. Are you using them as bait? The man was talking about Chun Yowan's group. Their plan was to have them stay behind the mansion and act as a barrier while they got out of the creek and returned safely. Hingwenja smiled. Yes. They will work well for their purpose. We will leave as soon as the doctor is finished packing up. Yes, Elder. While Hingwenja was talking with the scout, Gamrosu returned to her office. Her office was used as her lab, so it had many medicinal tools and books that helped her with the study. There was a lot of weird stuff inside, where one wall had a skeleton. That was preserved through medication set upon the wall. It was a creepy sight if one entered without any knowledge. But the skeleton had its waist area cut off as if it was cut into half when it was killed. NNGH. She threw one of the dishes she used to hold herbs to ease her rage. It was devastating that she had to abandon the home that her family had lived in for generations. But she had no choice as the enemy would surely come to attack her if she didn't leave. My path is surrounded by enemies. But was there a difference with enemies outside to those of Hingwenja's group? Gamrosu shook her head and glanced at two warriors watching over her by the door. If she refused, they were likely to force her to follow them anyway. I have no choice. She had no option, so she had to take as much as she could. She then walked over the bookshelves on the left side of the room and took out a book that read Herb List. When she opened, there was a small book inside the book. But this book seemed to be created with different material. When she opened the small book, there was the writing of simplified characters that was hard to read. It was hard to explain, but there were also drawings of humans inside out with details. This was like a treasure to any doctor. I will need this to complete the project. This book was a treasure she had got from her ancestors. After putting the book into her inner pocket, she packed tools and other stuff she needed. That's when some noise came from outside. I told you, the doctor is busy right now. Hey, we have a patient here. And we have a doctor here, right? Isn't it the doctor's job is to tend to patients? Come on. Ugh. Someone was trying to enter the office while warriors at the door were blocking them. The commotion kept on going, so Gamrosu became curious and opened the door to check what was going on. Huh? These people? It was Hubong and Ho Sangwa. Hubong was helping Ho Sangwa stand, who was bigger than him. She insisted her breast was aching. What is it? It's nothing, Granny Gam. You should finish what you were doing. Hubong frowned at the warrior's words and shouted angrily. Wow. It's nothing? Are you suggesting to the doctor that she ignore her patient? Be quiet. Chapter 281. Within the Sword Creek. Part 7. Warriors frowned at Hubong's strong protest. They had to let Gamrosu prepare to leave, but blocking her from tending to the patient also seemed too suspicious. Gamrosu then walked over and placed her hand over Ho Sangwa's wrist to check on the pulse. She then frowned weirdly. Her pulse? The warrior then asked the doctor. Is it bad? Gamrosu fell silent for a second, but nodded in response. Yes, I will have to take a look. Don't worry. It will be quick. Okay. The warrior nodded and allowed Hubong and Ho Sangwa to enter. Hubong then helped Ho Sangwa walk inside and had her lie down on the bed. He then spoke to the warriors who followed into the office. We should get out. Warriors frowned at the unexpected request. What are you talking about? We have to protect Granny Gam. Wow, are you saying that you will stay and watch a woman's private parts? Are you serious? What? Two warriors became dumbfounded at Hubong's words. Hubong then pointed at Ho Sangwa's breasts and shouted. Do you really want to see her naked body? Huh? Two warriors became dumbfounded and tried to protest in order to explain. And no. I mean we are just. Godly Dr. Gamrosu then added on to Hubong's claim. I will need to take off the patient's clothes. You men should stay outside. Are you going to tell me you are going to stay and watch her get naked? Ugh. Okay. We'll be outside. Make sure you do this quickly. They were ordered to stay by the doctor and never let her stay with these people without their watch, but there was no use. Hubong made a ruckus, so they couldn't take their eyes off from her chest. They insisted that the doctor make this quick and went out with Hubong. Early morning. The energy of the environment became very full. Every time he circulated the energy, it felt like if he was one with the environment. And on the ground at the cliff, there was a large crater that was not there last night. And within that crater, Yoan stood. His eyes were full of understanding unlike before. He took in a slow deep breath and let out and opened his right fist. I don't have any limit over my internal energy anymore. Every time he circulated energy within, the internal energy replenished instantly as it sucked the energy from the environment. At this rate, he had no limit of any energy usage unless he uses the strongest skill, which would require huge amount of energy usage. I can also increase the output to almost 3 times. His limit of energy usage, or the limit to control the energy within him, also increased by a large amount. It was not even close to when he was yet a superior master level. Yoan gasped with astonishment. Ah! I'm lucky. I've reached supreme master level. With unexpected understanding, Yoan was able to break the barrier. He was trying to find the balance between sword movements of sword force of the sky. Demon, but it actually worked to help him break the barrier to go up to the supreme master level. Yoan looked up to yet dark morning sky. The color was now turning to dark blue. It was the sign that morning was almost here. No. He wanted to take this time to focus on creating the new sword skill, but he had wasted too much time here. He was trying to find the way out, but instead came across the traces of Father Chunma and forgot about his servants above the cliff. I didn't find the balance among the movements, but I got something else. He wasn't talking about becoming the Supreme Master Warrior. He was talking about something different. Let's get out first. With his minds coming back to reality, he became concerned about a lot of things. It must have been shocking to his people to see him fall to the cliff with fires over his body. It was especially concerning to think about Munku. Yoan expected Munku would think he's dead and be terribly sad from it. How should I go up? But he couldn't find a way up yet. After thinking about it for a while, Yoan looked at all swords that were stuck on the ground and the wall and thought, wait, I don't need to find a way anymore. I can just make a way. At the same time, in a hidden mansion within Sword Creek, a man with black clothes entered Hingwenja's room. Is it prepared? Yes, Elder. The doctor is done with her preparations. Good. Are they still sleeping? Yes. We have eyes on them. I will take a look at them again just in case. There were 5 warriors standing watch at the medical room where guests were sleeping. If there was any problem, they would have known already. Go check and return with watchers down to the secret passage. Bring the doctor there. I will take my monks from the clan. Yes, Elder. If guests realized something was wrong, they would have left the mansion already. They planned to unlock the entrance to the hidden mansion, so it was likely that the enemies will rush in quickly. That would help them escape without any danger. The black-clothed man took the final mission and went to the medical room. Huh? He frowned as he got to the front of the building. Something was strange. There had to be 2 watchers on the roof, but they weren't anywhere to be seen. Wait. He then carefully opened the door and peeked in. There were 5 shadows over the bed in the dark room. He heard light breathing, so it's certainly these people were still sleeping. There's no problem here. Then where did they go? Wait. The man became shocked and walked in through the door. There was supposed to be 6 people in the room, but there were only 5. Who's missing? The man then carefully walked over to the bed and checked the face of the person on the bed. Damn it, the man on the bed was one of the watchers who had to be on the roof. He had his blood points sealed and had fallen unconscious. The man checked on everyone's beds, and they were all those who were assigned to stay on watch. They're gone.